Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into the futuristic world of Ocean's Godori by Elaine U. It's a story that promises political intrigue and character-driven storytelling, but is that what we got? Let's break it down. Now guys, Ocean's Godori takes us to a future where a united Korea dominates space exploration and military might. It's a pretty cool concept. The story centers on Ocean Yoon, one of the Alliance's top pilots. However, despite her skills and some bad luck, Ocean spends her career on a low-class ship doing small jobs and avoiding trouble. That is until her longtime friend, Teo Anand, or Anand? I don't know, gets framed for murder. Teo, he's the playboy heir to an empire, and Ocean steps in to help him clear his name. Before we go any further, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the in-between. First, if you're looking for a fast-paced science fiction action thriller, you're definitely going to be disappointed. I know I was. Despite what the book flap claims, this is anything but fast-paced. The plot of Ocean's Godori, it's really slow to develop and only really picks up speed about halfway through the book. I think I also have a digital version, and on the iPhone it said it was about 60% through when the actual thriller components came in. For me, it was kind of a deal breaker. I did not finish, but I pushed through. It moves painfully slow, and by the time it was going, I just kind of really wanted to wrap up. Cho focuses heavily on character relationships rather than the promised action sequences. And character development is totally fine. I love when characters are really well written. It can carry a book. However, it was not hitting it for me. Our protagonist, Ocean, she's a bit of a Mary Sue, if that term is still being used. She's the best at everything. She's the best pilot. There's a scene where she's riding a motorcycle and she's the best at that. She's the most accurate shooter in the Alliance, and it earns her the nickname Headshot. She also happens to be a wealth of knowledge on pretty much every subject, from cooking to JDM imports. It's a little too much for me. Some people might enjoy this, but I thought it was highly unrelatable. And in terms of, like video game characters, she would have been way overpowered, and it really took me out. Also, for some reason in fantasy and science fiction, military insubordination is everywhere. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's hardly ever done well, and it often makes the character childish and definitely selfish. And Yoon lives up to the stereotypes in droves. She's definitely a selfish character, and comes across as a little whiny. As far as the rest of the cast, the supporting cast doesn't fare much better. Although Ocean, Teo, and Haven are central characters, others come and go throughout the story without much development. There's a captain of the ship that plays a role in maybe the first 50% of the book, and then some events happen, and then she just virtually disappears. And it's really kind of weird because her character arc starts off as she's very personable and she's just kind of one of the guys, and then all of a sudden she becomes like a dictator on her own ship and she can't take a joke. It's kind of a heel turn for her, that is a little jarring. One of the characters that I thought was going to be the most interesting is Haven. He has some intriguing backstory. He's part of like the pseudo funeral directors that are trained in various rites. But for whatever reason, and it's not explained well, they're reviled across the galaxy for some reason. Pretty much everybody, as soon as they see him and they see his tattoos, they just kind of, they get a sour taste in their mouth. And again, if it is explained, I just totally bypassed that section, because I didn't understand it. So it falls a bit flat for me. And again, I thought that backstory, he's not just a character at that point, like he has something worthwhile and worth investing into. but it's just not there. Maybe it's going to be explored in a second book. I'm assuming that this is going to be part of a series because it just, the very end is completely wide open, but I'll touch on that in a little bit. I think my most damning critique of the book is the way that it was marketed. There's a quote on the back of the book where it mentions that Ocean's Godori is a dark and dreaming and thrilling in a Blade Runner kind of way. Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies. Even the sequel is highly amazing. So that really got me interested in the story. I thought that it was going to follow a similar vein to the Philip K. Dick story or maybe even the movie. But that component wasn't there. And I'm not entirely sure why there was that correlation between Ocean's Godori and Blade Runner. But it just was not for me. And then if you go to the publisher's website, they are making a comparison to The Expanse, which is one of my favorite series. I actually have them right behind me on the bookshelf. They're amazing. I think it's one of the more recent books that I've actually read, and definitely in the space opera genre that seems to get it right. Highly entertaining. And so when you're making a comparison to Blade Runner, which is, an all-time favorite for a lot of moviegoers, and then the book that is based on is also phenomenal. And then you're also comparing it to like a recent smash hit of The Expanse. I guess I was just kind of expecting more from this. But this is more of a character study. The story promises thrilling action and deep explorations of colonialism and capitalism, but the action is minimal. The thriller component doesn't come into play until about 60% through the book, and the socio-political commentary is nearly absent. There are a couple of references to it throughout the story. It just it didn't really go beyond surface level in depth. And I'm being kind of harsh, and again, it's pretty much because of the way the book was marketed. However, there are some positives. The bonding between the characters over family, expectation, and loss and grief, it's pretty well executed for being such heavy topics. I thought that they were well done. I think that if she actually leaned into this a little bit further, it could have been the best component of the book. And then there's also the world building. I think that, if there is a sequel to it, and again, I think that there is going to be, it could be really interesting. I haven't really come across any other science fiction story, none that I can think of anywhere, where North and South Korea have reunited. Let alone have reunited and they've become some superpower in the solar system. They dominate space exploration and military. As an aside, it was a little weird that there is no other kind of tangents or explainers on what other countries may be in our solar system. I think Russia is mentioned maybe one time, but none of the rest of Europe or Asia or even North America for that matter. So that's something that I think that she could really build on in the future and would make for a really interesting world. Should you read this book? I'm kind of two minds. One, if you are going off of the marketing material, you are going to be let down. However, two, if you go into it, and I described this book to my mother-in-law. She's a huge fan of K-dramas. And she thought that it sounded really interesting. It was basically what she thought of as a K-drama with, a space backdrop, if you will. So if you are of the mind of you are interested in those types of things, you like K-dramas and those types of character development, then maybe Ocean's Godori is right for you. It wasn't for me personally, but I could see there being fans of this series. And again, the world that Elaine Cho is creating, it really could be interesting. There is some technology in here towards the tail end of the book that comes into play that would be, I could see it playing a role in, maybe a heist scenario or like a political thriller. Currently, it's not necessarily being used that way, at least not to its fullest extent. And, again, a unified Korea dominating space is certainly unique. You have to give it that. So if you can look past the slower plot and the marketing missteps, you might appreciate the cast's personal journeys. Just some final thoughts before we go. Overall, Ocean's Godori, it's a mixed bag. It doesn't quite deliver on the high-octane science fiction action it promises. I think quite literally it calls itself high-octane, but it offers you a unique setting and deep character relationships. So if you're if you're okay with a slower pace and more focus on characters than plot, this might be a book you enjoy. But yeah, that's it for today's review. Have you read Ocean's Godori? If so, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more book reviews and recommendations. And until next time, happy reading.